Let's stand together for the reading of the word. 1 Peter chapter 5, we're going to read verses 5 through 7. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Lord, today these scriptures are open before us, and we want to consider your wisdom, your plan, your will, even as it so often contradicts with what comes natural to us. So teach us, Lord, give us an experience of your Spirit translating these words into our hearts and into our minds. Lord, may we become mature. May we be equipped. May we understand and know what your plan is for us. More than anything, may the reality of who you are become more clear to us as we grow in our relationship with you. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. So last week we began to talk about elders. And contrary to what the word might seem, the word elder does not necessarily mean old person, although it does apply to most of our elders. At least a couple of them are old, right, Joe? Yeah. So biblically, it's a term, you're a young man still. Biblically, it's a term used to describe those who serve in positions of leadership in the church. It's different than the term deacon. We always see elders and deacon. Whereas both are positions of serving in the church, the elder's main function deals with leadership and spiritual applications to the body. They are teaching, they're directing, they're making decisions, they're concerned with the vision and the direction of the church, they're caring for the family at large. Now, maybe you grew up in the church that was governed or led by deacons, and if you did, the reality is those deacons were probably serving more in an elder role biblically than in a deacon role. The biblical role for deacon was not one of spiritual leadership, but rather one of humble servanthood. The deacons were the ones who were waiting on tables, who were taking care of the poor widows who needed to be fed and who needed to be cared for, and so the deacon stepped in and took care of those kinds of responsibilities. The deacon serves in a position of hands-on, practical servanthood. Now, when a church starts out, they don't need deacons. This is what we see in the book of Acts, chapter 6. Originally, the elders in the church led and served in every area, and they were content to serve in all of those areas. But as the need grew, suddenly there was a need for deacons. It's a role of servanthood in the church that becomes necessary when the demands of leadership become so great that the elders find themselves neglecting discipleship and prayer and teaching in exchange for the physical work. So in the book of Acts, the elders found that they were spending so much time waiting on tables that they had very little time for prayer and study of the word. They were primarily the teachers. They were the spiritual guides in that church, and they could not effectively be a benefit to the body in that calling if they were spending all of their time, doing things like mopping the floors and folding the bulletins and cleaning the toilets. Before the demands of ministry grow, the elders should be content to do these things. A new church starts up and it starts to grow. The elders should be content to not only lead and teach, but also take on the responsibility of the physical needs and demands of the ministry, because that's the example we see in Acts chapter 6. The elder is a very important part of God's design for harmony and growth within the community of faith. They lead as servants. They don't lead by compulsion or manipulation or guilt. They don't lead with an expectation to be served or honored or recognized. They're here to provide teaching and compassion and prayer and direction and order. Last week we said the elder is not a cowboy who drives cattle, but they are a shepherd who leads the sheep. They serve on behalf of the congregation at large. They make decisions, they handle conflicts, they stand guard against division and dangerous doctrines. They also strive to live personal lives that are above reproach. They are committed to keeping one another accountable. In our fellowship, the elders are appointed only with the agreement of all the other elders. This is done after much prayer and consideration because it's of the utmost importance that the elders are able to serve in unity with one another, that they be men who can communicate the word and who can work together. Part of their role is to foster confidence among the family of faith. We, as your elders, want you guys to be confident that what's going on here is led by the Lord, that we're doing things that are truly about God's glorification and not any of our own ambitions or any of our own plans. They work together as a team, preventing the agendas of any one person that might be contrary to the doctrine or the vision or the direction of the church to take root. They have their hand on the pulse of the congregation, leading with compassion and understanding. They should be, quite honestly, one of the reasons why you would choose a church to attend. When you're looking to choose a church, the things you look for, you should pick a church because it has leaders who are genuine, humble, and truly caring. You should also pick a church because they believe in the Bible and they're teaching you the Bible, the whole Bible. Not just a topic here and then, but the whole counsel of the Word. Now, our culture has told us to pick a church in the same way that we might pick a car. If you're in the market to buy a new car, you have some ideas of things that you want in a car. You don't want fabric seats, you want leather seats. You want something that looks sporty. You don't want anything more than 2 years old. You want it to be new. You still want it to have that excitement when you hit the gas pedal, that acceleration. Don't buy a Honda. That's what we bought. It takes a couple minutes to get up to speed. Now, some Hondas are faster than others. Ours, I think, has the word echo on it somewhere, and that just kills it. When you're a car buyer, though, you're a consumer. You're out to consume. You're out to buy something that you want. And consumers ask specific questions. So when a consumer is looking for a church, they'll say, well, what does this fellowship of faith have for me? What do you have for me? What are the perks? What are the special programs that you have? What about the appearance and the presentation? How does it make me feel? How does a worship experience at this church make me feel? Does the environment make me feel a certain way? Is this church confronting my felt needs like a balm of comfort? Because that's what a lot of people want. They just want their felt needs, not their real needs, their felt needs to be temporarily comforted. Does it look like there's something cool and exciting going on that we can be part of? Oh, there's something exciting going on here. So many Christians have not been discipled to be spiritually mature followers of the Scriptures, so they've been deceived by the culture of the church to be consumers. Not disciples, consumers. So many Christians don't even get a chance. This is what our culture has confronted them with, our Christian church culture, that is, not to find a place that is led well, a place that teaches the whole counsel of the Word, a place that intently wants people to become equipped for the work of the ministry, but our culture has told Christians to find a church that gives them feelings. Now, there's still some believers who are looking for substance. They're looking for the things which really matter in Christian community, and one of those things which really matters is leadership. Part of what makes a community of faith work for you is that you're willing to recognize the leadership of the elders and trust it. Trust in what they do. You trust those elders, and when the church tries something new or it makes a shift in any way, while it might be different, a lot of people don't like different. Different is not always wrong or bad. You know that the elders who believe the word and who are guided by the Holy Spirit were unanimously in agreement with that change. That should provide some confidence. And also know this, if you think we're wrong, we want you to push back. We invite that. If you, oh man, why is the church doing this? Why do we change this? Why are we going a different direction? If you feel like it's wrong, we want you to push back. If something needs to be corrected, we want to be corrected. Part of what makes a community of faith work for you is that you are willing to submit not only to the authority of the word as we teach it, but you're confident that we are handling issues prayerfully, professionally, and for the best interest of the body. Now, it's part of the harmony. It's part of the natural balance of things that God has designed for Christian fellowship. Just as there are diverse gifts scattered in our midst, practiced as the Holy Spirit leads for the edification of the body, there are also diverse roles which are filled to bring about God's design and harmony. And I believe there are still some of those roles that need to be filled in our midst. But we're doing the best we can with what we have. If you want our community of faith to edify you and provide for you, it's not important that, we have all of the special things. Well, I'm a middle-aged single person who likes basket weaving. Do you have a special ministry for me? Oh, absolutely, we do. We have the middle-aged single basket weaving ministry. A lot of people are just looking for their very specific thing. Do you have this specific ministry for me? Or, do you guys have a bookstore? No, we don't have a... Do you have bounce houses for the kids? Only on special events, but not on... do you guys have a light show? It doesn't smell like fog machine in here. No. Do you have unsaved professional musicians on contract in the worship band? Yeah, every guy up here is an unsaved. Today, everyone... unsaved professional musicians on contract. All of them. No, we have expectations. If they are serving in ministry, they are believers in Jesus, and they're genuinely serving for the right reasons. That was totally a joke, Damien. I know you're a Christian. All right? When our fellowship experience is operating in that harmony, we'll find positive, beneficial things happening in our midst. We'll find ourselves growing and maturing and stepping out in faith. We'll find God's grace and comfort in times of conflict. We'll find an atmosphere that is unwelcoming to dissension and division. We've been doing this for 24 years. But those first 5, 6, 7 years were rough. There was the attempt for dissension and division entering into the fellowship quite frequently. The church grew fast early on. Before we did all our church plants, there was a lot of people coming from a lot of different directions, and there was excitement. And the pastor was just this dumb kid, 29-year-old, doesn't know what he's doing, didn't go to seminary. So people who felt like they were more qualified, they would show up and they would really kind of vie for positions of leadership, and there would be dissension, there would be division, there were these ambitions that were there, and I had good leaders, but we weren't well established to where that still had the opportunity to get a foothold. I had one guy who wasn't even an elder, but man, he was a watchdog. His name is Scott Green, and he'd be at a men's Bible study, and I wouldn't be there, so it would be an opportunity for people to come up with these ideas, and he would shut them down. He was amazing. But I feel like we have good leaders now, and the environment is not welcoming to dissension and division. You can come and try, it's just not going to work. You can come in here with your own ideas and your ambitions. You can come in here and try to spread other doctrines. You can come in here and try to vie for a position. And I just don't think it's going to work. Because you're up against a bunch of guys who are leading well. Church community is kind of like a beehive. This might be a bad illustration, but I think it works. My friend Mike, who's one of our elders, we raised bees together and had a whole bunch of hives, and now he just has a couple hives. He does it himself, but we used to work together, and And I was like, man, a church community is kind of like a beehive. We serve the King of Kings, the one who provides for us life and purpose. They serve the queen. She provides life and purpose for the hive. Without the queen, they have no purpose. Without the queen, they have no life. In the church, you have different people using different gifts and serving in different roles. And sometimes as a new believer, there are certain things that we do. But as we grow and as we mature, we might take on different roles and responsibilities. You know, we might say, hey, I'm going to come and clean the church twice a month. But a couple years down the road, there might be some changes in your life. And you're like, yeah, I really feel like I want to teach. I want to lead a group. You know, things might change over time. It's kind of like that in a beehive. When the worker bee is born, it spends the first part of its life in both construction and in children's ministry. Now, their life is like 4 months. Okay, so they're getting a lot done in this time period. If there's need to build more honeycomb or comb to lay more eggs in, they will literally secrete wax from their abdomens, and they'll use it to build comb. Their queen is laying eggs, and so they'll have to tend to the young. That bee spends every waking moment either building comb or tending to and feeding the brood. That's how they start out. That's entry-level ministry work right there. But after some time of faithful service, they graduate to guard duty. You guys come down here, you gals, that is. You gals come down here, and you stand at the entryway, and you are on guard. You are protecting the hive from potential threats, and if a threat comes along, the guard bee will fly into the threat, bumping against you. Ever had a bee bump against you? Here's outside, and you're like, whoa, what was that? You know what that was? You're about to be in trouble. That's what that was. Because what they're doing is they're bumping against you and they're grabbing your scent. They've identified you as a threat. Now they're taking that scent back to the other guard bees. And they're saying, hey, y'all smell this? Yeah, we smell it. That's someone we need to go sting. And they do. And so if you're still there, here they come. You are the enemy. So they sound the warning to one another. They join in to protect the hive as a common threat. Then they go and they sting that bear or that raccoon or that person who's just walking by. Did you know that you should never have a banana on you around bees? Did you know that? There's a pheromone that they put off that is like a warning signal. You know, when they're under attack, they put off this pheromone. Guess what it smells like? Bananas. So it was always fun when we were working on the hives. I would just like slip a banana peel in Mike's pocket. He's like, man, why are the bees, why are they all over me today? I said, I don't know, they're not bothering me. After some time, they're promoted to their third and final role in life. And that is the role of finding, gathering, and delivering sustenance to the hive. This is when they really begin to work. A honeybee can accumulate up to 500 miles of travel in a lifetime. They live 1 to 4 months long, depending on the time of year, and they die simply because they've completely and totally worn themselves out. Sometimes you're in the hive and you're looking, and you'll see this bee and its wings. It can't fly anymore. The wings are just all ragged and worn out. Like fellowship communities, beehives have some unique challenges. There are drone bees there. They serve an important role. They mate with the queen once. That's it. That's all they do. Other than that, they're useless. They're just in the way. They're eating food, just hanging out. They're kept around just in case the hive needs to make a new queen. In the meantime, they're of no benefit to the hive. They're just eating. They eat, they don't work. Now, in the fall, as the hive prepares for the winter, they are given the right foot of disfellowship. They are all kicked out. All you drones, see ya. Get out. There are other problems: mites, waxworms, skunks, bears, viruses, chemical threats. There's an aggressive strain of honeybee which was developed in Brazil when they brought these queen honeybees from Africa, you know, and they escaped and they've spread up through Central America. I know some of you older folks might remember, we were all scared of killer bees because there were some movies that came out back in the 80s. Killer bees, they're not that bad. But they are aggressive, and they've moved into Georgia, and Georgia is the main provider of honeybees. And so now everybody's getting honeybees, and some of them are of this Africanized strain. And when they take over a hive, that hive becomes very aggressive. They become very dominant. They're more difficult to keep. They don't produce that much honey. And we've had a few hives like that. I continue to be amazed at the similarities between the two. There will always be drones in the midst of Christian community. There will always be dangers. There will be predators. There will be certain spiritual illnesses. There will be aggressive doctrines that spread through the church. There will always be a wild and challenging world which provides a never-ending source of contention and challenge. But in the midst of these elements, we are called to be a people of purpose, to know our role and to walk in it. Finding and fulfilling our roles inside the community of faith, caring for and nurturing one another, standing guard against the threats, and bringing nourishment, bringing the word, bringing encouragement to one another. The Bible outlines the calling and the qualifications of an elder in 3 places, in 1 Timothy 3, in Titus chapter 1, and here in 1 Peter chapter 5. So Peter was writing to a group of believers who were facing conflict and opposition. They had enough problems coming at them from the world. It was vital that they be held together with good leadership. And so these elders were reminded that they were shepherds. They were to lead. They were not called to push or compel. Who were they to shepherd? They were to shepherd the flock that was among them. Don't domineer over them. Lead as an example. Do it all for the purpose of glorifying God. So today, the topic shifts away from those who are serving as elders towards those who are being led by the elders, and maybe even towards those who are aspiring to become elders. And for them, there's a call for humility. And it ends with this promise. The promise is that at the proper time, he, that is God, may exalt you. Now, this word exalt could, and in this context, should go a couple of different ways. It could mean lifted up. That's what exalt means, to take something to lift it up. It could mean lifted up into a role of leadership or a role of honor because there's a specific target audience, that is those who are younger. Or it could mean to those who are oppressed. It could mean lifted up from your place or your experience of hardship and suffering because the audience is called to cast all their anxieties upon God. There's context for both of these applications. But the word is what the word is, but the context reflects both applications. But today we're going to talk primarily about those who are desiring to serve in leadership. Those who have ambition for leadership. Those who recognize that they have gifts and abilities to lead, those who have yet to mature or who have yet to be tempered, but they have gifts and they're struggling with that gift and that desire to lead and the lack of maturity that they don't realize they have. This is the challenge almost every up and coming leader has to work through. They have drive, they have gifts, they desire to lead, they desire to use their gifts. They can easily become the cowboys that we talked about last week. They can hop on the horse and drive the cattle, but God's model for leadership is not the cowboy, it's the shepherd. This role requires humility, patience, a good example. For a shepherd cannot control the followers. He can only prove himself as one worthy of being followed. And with that, then lead. Let's look again at verse 5. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourself, all of you, with humility towards one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Now, the command here wasn't to just be humble, as if it were like some mental assent you can kind of drop yourself into. The call here is to actively and decisively clothe yourself with it. Literally put on humility. Humility isn't a feeling. Humility is an aspect of character that we grow into, but before we can truly develop humility through maturity and character, we simply have to put it on. It's like we have to choose by faith to say humility is the right thing. By faith, I'm choosing it, even though I don't feel like it. I'm choosing it by humility. Humility doesn't come naturally. You know what comes naturally? Pride comes naturally. Like we are good at pride. Man, we can do pride like nobody's business. It's the hard part of trying to be a regenerate, saved, redeemed spiritual person. We are called to contradict that which comes naturally. We are called to go, not follow our heart, but to go against our heart. We are called to recognize that naturally I am driven to go this way, but the scriptures are calling me to go this way, contrary to what I feel like I want to do. And so it's a continual challenge. Anger comes naturally. Fear comes naturally. Anxiety comes naturally. Lust comes naturally. Lies of self-justification. We are good at that one. Deceit comes naturally. And tying it all together is the mother of all natural tendencies, pride. What we are called to do in wisdom and obedience is to act in faith contrary to all of these internal motivations. In time, we mature and grow, and we may actually develop humility as part of our character. Humility comes with the development of character, but to get there, we're actually rejoicing in suffering. We're gaining endurance. Through endurance, we're getting character. We're growing to become a person who has a hope that does not disappoint, a hope that is in God's glory, not in what we want. Our desires and our focus are upon the Lord and not upon ourselves. It's not an easy process to grow in character. But we get to that place where we develop humility. Humility comes with the willingness to overcome all the pride and all the lust and all the deceit and all the self-justification responses that we want to give. We are supposed to be a people who are transformed by the renewing of our minds. But maybe you might say, well, I'm not there yet. My mind has not been renewed to that point yet. There's still a long road of maturity ahead. Until then, here's what you need to do. Actively and obediently clothe yourself with humility. It literally means to tie it on or to take on the characteristic of. The verb is derived from a noun. That noun is the word used to describe an apron. An apron, because it was an article of clothing that needed to be tied on. And what article of clothing speaks more of servanthood than an apron? A great illustration can be found in John 13. John 13, chapter 3, verse 5. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose up from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist, and he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now, the towel that Christ wrapped around his waist was, in functionality and purpose, it was the apron that a slave would wear. It's not the same word, but it was a piece of cloth that was tied on, which is what our word in 1 Peter chapter 5 literally means. Jesus assumed the role of servanthood. He did that which was normally reserved for the lowest in the household to do. The act of clothing yourself with humility is oftentimes an act of bringing the flesh in subjection to God, because the flesh does not want to be humble. It's not just a matter of choosing humility, but it's a matter of believing in humility. An external display of humility with a heart of defiance, guess what that is not? That is not humility. A heart of defiance and an external display of humility is usually obvious that that's not humility. An external display of humility with the intent to manipulate others, that's not humility. It's usually passive aggression. But the intent is to manipulate others with this display of humility. That's not humility. Peter was addressing the future leaders here. When you find young, gifted, ambitious, and maybe prideful people in the church giving the leaders grief, oh, this kid is driving me crazy. This kid is so arrogant. They have most likely, well, you know who those guys are? They're probably your future leaders. Because they have identified callings and giftings within them, but they haven't matured to the point where they understand how to walk in them. They're just like, how come if I'm really good at doing this, I can't do it? Well, because you're still kind of a knucklehead. You know, you haven't really matured. You haven't really grown up. And by young, I mean young in the faith. We shouldn't be offended. We shouldn't be put off by young, gifted believers who are struggling maybe with the arrogance that they have because they recognize they're gifted. It's just a sign that they recognize a gift and maybe a calling, but they haven't yet recognized the imperative need to mature in that calling. The gifts and the ambitions come out first. The humility, the temperance, the patience, the understanding, and the wisdom, those things come later. Don't you wish it was the other way around? Don't you? It would be so much easier if we could just first learn humility and temperance and patience and understanding and gain wisdom and grow in character, and then the gift develops. But no, usually the gift comes first. Gifts and abilities found in the flesh need to be qualified in the Spirit. This is why most of us can probably look back to a time in our life regretfully to the mistakes we made in ministry when we were younger. You know, we said, well, I'm a Christian now and I feel like I can I want to do some things for the Lord and I'm good at this. And so, we're given a position to serve. But then we find out that sometimes volunteering and serving is difficult. Or we were so excited to serve that maybe we overcommitted. Now we have overcommitment regret. And what we do is we bail out. I'm out of here. We bail out when we don't get recognized. I don't know what's going on here. I signed up to be a helper downstairs with the toddlers. You know that's the hardest job in the church. And I signed up to be a helper in the toddlers, and I've been doing it for 3 weeks, and I have not received a gift. No one has patted me on the back. No one's brought me up front, put a crown on my head. No, nothing. Not even a coffee cup. I'm out of here. We bailed out when we weren't given important positions. Oh, I'm important. I'm gifted. I need an important position. Hello, Pastor Chad. I've been here for 3 weeks, and I'm a spiritual giant, and I want to be in a position of leadership. And I might say, well, why don't you talk to Major about the greeting ministry or talk to Sandy about the cleaning ministry? We have needs there, and maybe you can work with the video ministry. And no, I want a position of leadership. I want to be seen. I want to lead. Well, no, I don't know you. I don't want you to lead. I want to know who you are. We've seen our share of gifted future young leaders bail out on us in the last 24 years. For many of us in our own lives, it's part of the process. In my younger years, I bailed out on my share of opportunities to serve the Lord because I had yet to mature. Peter is addressing this crowd. This is who he's talking to. He's talking to the know-it-all spiritual giants who are in the protective greenhouse bubble at Bible school. You have never met more spiritual people than the ones who are in Bible school. Holy smokes, they are spiritual giants because they are in that protective greenhouse where everybody is up at 5 a.m. doing devotions, and everybody is listening to the same worship music, and everybody's in the same Bible class, and everybody's just talking about wanting to be worship leaders and wanting to be pastors and wanting to be missionaries. Man, I have never been so spiritual as I was in 1988 and 1989. I was a spiritual giant back then, there in that greenhouse. But what we don't realize is that that's not the real world. That's not the real world. He's talking to the young idealists who have no idea what real hardships in life are like. When Julie and I got engaged, she immediately left me. I went to Thailand and India for 6 months. So I decided the best thing I could do was work 3 jobs. And so I was winding electric motors all day. 2 or 3 nights a week, I was doing a night audit at a hotel. Those were interesting days. Work all night long, get off, go straight, work all day long. Then on the weekends, I was a weekend manager at this coffee shop in Lynchburg, just right outside the gates of Liberty University. And so there were always these young guys who would sit in the coffee shop, drinking coffee all day, wearing berets, debating the 27 different views on Reformed eschatology from a philosophical viewpoint, just sounding brilliant. I would sit down and they would talk and I'd be like, I need to go make some more coffee. It's like, man, I can't keep up with you guys. Man, did they sound smart. And yet they'd never led a family, they'd never fathered children, they'd never worked full-time jobs, they'd never paid bills. They know nothing about what it means to lead in ministry, but man, did they sound brilliant. Peter is telling those guys, even though they think they know better and are smarter and have it all figured out, in spite of all of that, they should still subject themselves to the leadership of the elders, and they should make a decisive effort to be humble and practice humility towards others. I love the phrase, with humility towards one another. It might be an easy thing to submit to leadership and give the leadership a display of humility if then you can go back to your peers and have a spiritual brag fest on how great you are. But here the young future leaders are being called to minister to one another by practicing mutual examples of humility. To emphasize the point, Peter references Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34. It says in that verse, "Toward the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor." If you want to expedite the generous flow of grace which comes your way from the Father, then practice humility towards others. Let's look at verses 6 through 7 from today's passage. "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you." So in the previous verse, we are challenged to wear humility, to intentionally tie it on to our lives. Here we're being told literally to allow ourselves to be humbled. Now, you might not be the gifted, know-it-all, untempered, wannabe leader who is frustrated because the pastor won't allow you to teach Greek on Sunday morning to the congregation. You might not be that guy. You're just a normal mom, normal dad, normal single person who's working, trying to do work in school, going to school full time, trying your best to live a life for Jesus and grow in Jesus. And then we come to this leader stuff in the Bible, because we're going verse by verse. That's what we do. There's this temptation to say, oh, that's not for me. I'm not a leader. I'm just going to zone out. Oh, we're talking about elders again 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to zone out. Wake me up if Chad tells a joke. It doesn't matter if you're called to lead or not. Trust me, your life will benefit if you are walking in humility towards one another. Humility is for everybody. We are called to allow ourselves to be humble. God's hand is still mighty. Whether we are an aspiring prophet who's going to lead the church in the next revival, or you're the person who sneaks in here quietly twice a month and cleans the floors. God's hand is still mighty. And our hearts are still naturally given to pride. And no matter how we serve, no matter how we live out this relationship with God, he knows us, he loves us, he has a plan for us, and in some way, he will exalt us. God will exalt you. Now, don't interpret that through pride. Because pride will say, oh, God's going to exalt me to a position of honor. God's going to exalt me to a position of recognition. I'm going to be up in front of the people, and I'm going to be doing things that they're going to be so impressed with, and they're all going to tell me afterwards how great it was. The word exalt is difficult because we're being called to be humble. Why? Well, in pride, we want to exalt ourselves. God says, be humble. Why? So in time, when he sees fit, he can exalt us. He can lift us up. The lifting up is God's business, not ours. If you choose humility as a strategy to gain exaltation later, then your humility isn't complete. You have a selfish motive. With humility comes the reality that we're not in this for our fame. We're in this for God's fame. This is a common teaching. There's a few other verses that say the same thing. James chapter 4, verse 10. Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will exalt you. Matthew 23, verse 12. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Now, there's a paradox of heart motive here. For if our humility is a motivation for future exaltation, that's not humility. Maybe a better way to understand this is by asking, well, what does God want out of me? What does God want out of me? Here I am, Lord. What do you want me to do? What do you want me to know? How do you want me to behave towards other people? If I ask, what do I want out of me? I'll come to a different conclusion. If I look in the mirror and say, Chad, what do I want out of me? Somehow, Chad, I want you to become a fishing guide in Montana, independently wealthy. And that's all you do, is you guide people fishing. That's what I want out of me. Oh, that sounds awesome. Is that what God wants out of me? No, not yet. Not yet. Maybe that's his plan for the future, but not yet. I want an exaltation that is in liking to my flesh. But if I ask, what does God want? Everything falls in line. God wants us to receive his love and grace so that we will return love to him, and he will be exalted and glorified. God wants it to be about him, so whatever our exaltation ends up being, it will be for him and not for us. Verse 7 is something we need to be reminded of regularly. I like this. God cares for us. Did you know that? God cares about you. Once again, there will be times where we feel anxiety. It's going to be there. Fear will be there. Doubt will be there. We're going to feel these things. But if we act on them, suddenly it becomes sin. If we act in faith in spite of our feelings, if we cast those anxieties upon God and not allow them to rule us, then we're being obedient. Lord, I'm facing this thing. I feel doubt. I have fear. I don't like this, but I'm going to cast this upon you, and I'm going to walk in obedience and do what you've called me to do. Why do we get anxious? Well, two reasons. Most of the time, there's no explanation for it. You get anxious because you're broken. You're not perfect. Your flesh has not yet fully been transformed and redeemed. Your spirit is, but your flesh still struggles. Put me in a large social setting with people I don't know and I don't have a job, I feel anxiety. But I know I'm supposed to be there, so I do it. Some people have it without any kind of prompt. Some people have it when there's chaos. They just feel anxiety. The other reason is just fear. We anticipate outcomes that haven't happened, and we feel fear over events that probably won't ever play out, like 99% of the conspiracy theories that we worry about. Oh, the government. Oh, the BlackRock. Oh, these terrible things are going to happen. Oh, you're going to wake up on Friday and the banks are all going to be shut down. Oh, we're so scared. Well, that might happen. But I look back at my long history of observing conspiracy theories, and they almost never come to pass, but at the same time, we're going to worry about them. Oh man, we're going to worry about them. We're going to feel fear. Anxiety is a reminder that we are, in our flesh, broken, imperfect, and in continual need of Jesus. I feel anxiety. That's a reminder to me, I need Jesus. I feel fear and doubt about the situation. That's a reminder to me that, man, I still need Jesus. But by faith, we're told not to be ruled by it. Cast them on Jesus and then walk in faith. The recipients of this letter were anxious. Why? They were living in troublesome times. They've already been cast out of their homes and cities. The persecution is knocking at the door. Many of these recipients would suffer and even die for their faith. None of that negates God's care. God still cares for them. But rather, God's care, concern, and love for them would be the thing that gives them strength. For his care grants them peace in the world. His care grants them benefits in suffering. And his care grants them glory on the other side. Now, next week, we're going to talk about our adversary. We'll talk about the schemes and the plots which are laid, the traps which are set. Some drawing us in based solely on our human nature. Some set specifically for us, because there is no greater psychologist in the world than the devil. Our adversary knows our weaknesses. Today's passage is a challenge for me because, well, I recognize, probably like you, that humility does not come easy. Even after all these years of walking with Jesus, pride still is just there, knocking on the door. And so I need the challenge to intentionally tie humility on and walk in it, practice it by faith. Humility takes me out of the way and exalts the Lord. Extending humility to one another enables me to experience God's grace all the more. Do you want to experience God's grace? Of course I do. Then extend humility to others. Yeah, but what about when they offend me? Oh, what a great opportunity for you. Someone in church offended you? Yeah, they did. Oh, man, here's a great opportunity for you to extend humility to them. They've just presented you with the most wonderful opportunity. What, to get mad and leave the church? No, that would be you being dumb. But you being obedient to the word would be, here's your opportunity to extend humility. I try to extend it by doing my best as often as possible I want to ascribe the best possible intentions and motives upon the person that maybe offended me. If I'm offended, here's what I realize. If someone offends me, I realize, you know what? Sometimes I offend people. Sometimes the filter is just not there. And I say things that should not be said, and I offend people, and I have to come to them and say, I can't believe I said that. I didn't mean that. And I apologize. I don't mean to offend, but all the same, I do. And with knowing what I'm capable of, I recognize that in others. If I don't mean to offend, but sometimes I do, maybe this person didn't mean to offend, even though they did. And so I extend humility. I consider that it's likely that the offense was not the intent of the person's heart. In a community of faith, I would hope and pray this is what we are doing. Over the years, many people have left church, and when you try to do a follow-up, so they're like, all right, why did you actually go? And oftentimes it boils down to someone in the church offended them. Well, that's going to happen. Well, I don't get offended at work. Well, how involved in the lives of those people at work are you? Are they opening themselves up to you? Are you opening your life up to them? Are you praying for one another? Are you being vulnerable? That's what happens in church. We build relationships and we become vulnerable. It's so much easier for us to offend and get offended in church than at the bowling league or at the workplace or with our gang that we hang out with down at the bar. I mean, none of those guys are offending you. That's because you are not living in community and intimacy with them. You're going to get offended in church. I'll probably offend you from time to time. Come talk to me about it. It was a mistake. I'll say I'm sorry and we'll get over it like adults. When we believe that malice is in the offense, oh, they offended me. Oh, really? What happened? Well, they said this. And then we say, this is what they meant. This is why they did it. This is why it was offense. When we say there is malice in that offense and we make accusations are very costly things to make. You were offended by them. What happened? They probably didn't mean it. I'm going to let them calm down and we'll talk later. I'm not going to take it to heart. Or I'm offended. Oh, man, I don't know why they did this. They probably meant this, and suddenly got some gossip going on, and you're ascribing malice to them. You're making an accusation. Accusations are costly things to make. May we know humility. May we practice it. May we embrace it. May we walk in it. Even as Peter walked on the water, that was a big step of faith. Hey, I'm going to walk in this water. I know it's a miracle. I know it doesn't seem right, but I'm going to do it. You know what doesn't feel right? You know what seems miraculous? Defying our pride and walking in humility. But that's God's plan for us.